minutes to, he's already worried that I overslept and is getting out of the car to bang on the door, which he did once this week. Except he didn't tap too gently. He bling bong, waking up the Frau.
Oh,
Yes.
that's the show.
Yes. Do I ever speak Checker? Did you ever once hear me speak Checker? I am an ish MS.
No, it's a niche.
What are you talking? Look at me. I'm a mess. A mess. What's today's date?
23rd.
Is today the 23rd? Oh, good. I'm glad I got this. Thank you, Rabbi. Because we have a person. Okay. We gratefully acknowledge the contributions from various sponsors who enable learning in the shul. After Year of Learning by Friends of Nina Moinister, Nachama Asna Bas Yitzchak Aaron. Friends of Stephen Vigner, Vigder, Simcha Melech Ben Meir Lev Halevi, all of a shalom. Friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha Bas Rivka Oleha Hashalom. Isaac and Evelyn Blacher in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Iser Oleha Hashalom. Friends of Leonie Meiselman, Leah Sabra Bas Chanach Zundula Hashalom. Month of Learning, Andrea and David Dolney in memory of her father, Tzvi Herschel Hillel ben Avraham Olav Shalom. Dov Bodlander in memory of his father, Tzvi ben Yaakov Yitzchak Olav Shalom, his mother, Baila Devasha Bas Harav Dov Beresh Oleha Hashalom, his father-in-law, Yehuda Tzvi ben David Nachum Olav Shalom, and his mother-in-law, Alta Chaya Bas Avram Yosef Oleha Shalom. Melon Haran Haller in memory of his father, Avram ben Zev Olav Shalom. Week of Learning, Michael and Sharon Glass in memory of his mother, Rivka Yitta Bas Yitzchak HaKohen Oleha Hashalom. And A Day of Learning by Jack and Sandy Friedman in memory of his father, Yosef ben Yaakov Olav Shalom. Shuda Shalishus. And this Shabbos is sponsored by Morris Solomon in memory of his mother, Leah.
That was last week.
Oh, okay. All right. So we need both Taka. Because I like to announce that because they don't do it tomorrow. Or you do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Then I don't need it because he didn't.
Right. No.
All right, whatever.
When I do it on Shabbos,
You do that.
I do that.
Thank you. So then I don't have to do it this morning. Okay. So today we have where is everybody?
They're still coming in.
Oh, I'm chomping at the bit. This is such a great story.
Okay,
while I'm chomping.
No, while you're ready to do this, I happen to make a copy of what the Torah notes were specifically on this story.
Oh, let me read them quick.
Okay, it's in very small print. You may need your glasses.
No, oh my God. Yeah, I don't like this. I don't like Rashi in there.
What?
I said Rashi says that it was Alstanai.
Right, but it's interesting.
But it wasn't written in the deed.
But it's interesting to see who they bring sometimes as an alternative to Rashi.
It usually Taisvis.
Not, but in this case, it's not. We'll see who it is.
It's just most early Taisvis.
Yeah, the Trani.
Uri Magash.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I mean, this is but the other cool thing is that it talks about like you need a bank loan, so I give you harama. I give you my apartment so you can buttress your assets. And then you say, tough noogies, you were a jerk to lend it, give it to me. The whole story is A, delightful, and B, is mamish applicable to our ways of doing things.
Let us in. Let us in on this story. You're ready.
I'm with the island isn't here yet.
All
All right, well, we're going to start. How many are missing? Where's Marty? Okay, where is, oh, he's here. Okay. So we are 3 lines from the bottom on Ayin Ches Amid Aleph, the penultimate word. Amid Beis, yeah. The penultimate word. Ha'itza, there was a lady. Now I'm adding here that presumably was independently wealthy. Okay. And there was a fellow courting her. So the baya de av de chinahu lenechasa megavra. Remember this word, the asverinahu, because we're going to come up with a cognate later. And she wished to protect her property from her suitor, so that if she marries him, he will not have control of it. Okay? So what did she do? Kesavtinahu labarta. She deeded her property to her daughter. Now, Rashi says that she spoke out in front of male adult witnesses, that she was doing this for the specific purpose of keeping it out of the hands of the suitor. Others disagree, and the flow of the Gemara seems to indicate it was stam, as we will see, without stipulation later. Then in Siva, so now she's protecting herself, and she marries the suitor. And she was right to be wondering about him, because Iskarsha, he divorced her reasonably soon thereafter. So she goes to Bezdin and she attempts to recover her property from her daughter. Say Lakaimi to Reb Nachman. So they went to Reb Nachman, and she said, I only gave it to her because I wanted to keep it out of the guy's hands. And the daughter said, there are no conditions in the deed, I'm keeping it. And Karya Reb Nachman L'shtara, Reb Nachman sided with the woman and tore up the deed that transferred it to the wife, to the daughter. Okay, so another Rav, Azil Rav Anan L'kaimid Demar Ukfa. Anan, who was present at this Din Torah where Rav Nachman tore up the deed, he was upset with that psak, and he went to Mar Ukfa. Rashi says Mar Ukfa was the Av Bezdin, was on a higher madrega. No, he was the. Well, Rashi says he was the Av Bezdin, and he complained about Rav Nachman. Amaleh, he says about Rav Nachman, Chazi Mar Nachman Hakala'a. Do you see this? The way this Rav Nachman, who is a lowlife, who is ignorant of halacha. In his bezdin, he cavalierly tears up deeds of property owners. He undoes transactions unjustly. Amarle, Marukva says to him, Aimali easy. What's going on? Gufa of the Chave, exactly, tell me exactly what happened, leave nothing out. Amarle, he explained to him, Hechi v'Hechi Have, exactly what happened. Amarle, Rav Marukva said back to this Rav Anan, Shtar mevarachas ka amar. You're talking about a shtar mevarachas, which that's that same word. It's a known sort of thing to do, to have what we in modern world would call a prenup if the woman is wealthy and marries someone, so that the husband would not gain access, would not inherit, would not get nichsei maluk rule rights to her property. That's a known entity. Hachi Omer Rav Chanilai Bar Idi Omer Shmuel. And Rav Chanilai quotes Rav Shmuel as saying, Shmuel said this, Moira hara ani. I have, literally, I have smicha, but here it means I have permission from the Reish Galusa to make halachic decisions. And the ani, and I say, im yovo shtar mav rachas lidei no, that such a document, a star that was only for the purpose of getting the money away from the husband, that should be torn up if the marriage ceases. So we see that Rav Nachman had a justification going back to Shmuel, and Rav Anan was wrong, perhaps. Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman. So Rava asks Rav Nachman, time of my. What was the basis that Shmuel said tear up such a deed, and that you followed his psak? So Shmuel answers, the lo shavik inish nafshe yahavev lacharine. A person doesn't normally give every single thing he has away to somebody else and leave himself penniless. Okay? So Rava says back to Rav Nachman, Hani mili lacharine. That applies if we're talking about a stranger, a non-family member. However, Ava Labarta Yahava, perhaps when she gave it to her daughter, it was a legitimate transfer. And what she was trying to do was prevent this or some future husband from inheriting it. She wants to keep it in the family, and she was genuinely giving it to the daughter. So Reb Nachman says, Afilu hachi, if the woman now comes to, even if that were the premise, which is a refutation perhaps of Rashi's pshat, Afilu hachi, nevertheless, b'makam barta nafsha difala. If it's a dispute between a person and his or her child, the person always gives himself the benefit of the doubt, so to speak, that you're more important to you than even your kid is. My wife, when she overheard us learning this, questioned that. Okay, so Mesve, they want to challenge this whole business, okay? And there's a new document I have to explain called a shtar pasim. A shtar pasim, we have it in the modern world too. Ruvain wants to borrow $100,000 from the bank. He goes to the bank to Chase, and they say, you don't have enough assets. So he comes to me and he says, do me a favor, give me a deed to your apartment so I have more assets. Then he goes to Wells Fargo, and based on his new asset claim, he can borrow the money. But everybody recognizes that it's a harama, and he doesn't really own my property. So we'll see. So haroitzel is if a woman wants to keep her property out of the hands of her husband, Kate said, what should she do? She should use the formula of a shtar pasim to transfer it to others. Divrei Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. That's what Reb Shimon ben Gamliel say. If that's a risk factor here, because if you try to get it back, Rutza mitzachek. Ruvain, when I ask him for my apartment back, will laugh at me. You gave it to me. Tough noogies, no good deed goes unpunished. Okay. So odd. So how does the donor or grantor protect him or herself? Ad shetichtav lo mehayom ulikasha artse. You put in the deed, I am transferring it to the other party as of today, providing at some future date, I confirm the transaction. So now, by non-confirmation, you can reclaim it.
Does the bank see this, the see the star also?
I wouldn't know. I mean, I don't borrow money from banks.
But they would, if they would see
No,
something.
because so the guy says, I mean, he would look in the county and they would see that the deed was transferred.
All right,
They wouldn't see that it's
Yeah, I get it.
conditional.
All right.
We do that today. Every home purchase contract, the seller says, I am transferring the property to you, and then the buyer puts a clause pending the an inspection. So we have those kinds of clauses in deeds today. Okay, so she has to do that. Now, Taima, the kasva lehachi. The reason that this concept works is because of this condition, and you're careful not to meet the condition. Ha, lo kasva lehachi, but the woman giving it to her daughter was unconditional. So the daughter should have gotten it unconditionally. It should really, really, really be hers. Amar Reb Zera Lakasha, not a problem. Ha Bakula. Shmuel is talking that we recognize that it's a harama if you give everything you have away to the daughter. Ha b'mitzasa. If I give Reuven the deed to my condo in Daytona, since I have other property, Reuven could claim that was a real gift. And I would hasten to announce that Reuven is an entirely scrupulous person, and this is not the Reuven I was talking about. The ilo kananehe lakeach. So now the Gemara asks a Gemara kind of a question. If the transfer isn't truly legitimate, nikne hubal. So then the husband should be able to step in and call it nichse malug, and if the woman passes away, he should claim the property from the daughter because it was a harama. So the Gemara answers a yeshiva kind of an answer. Amar Abaye, Sa'um Nichasim she'en yaidim leba'al. We put properties that are transferred through one of these haramadika deeds into the category of properties the husband doesn't know about, and therefore they're clear of him. Aliba de Reb Shimon, and that is in accordance with Reb Shimon. And the Rishonim here comment, and since the Gemara makes this blanket statement that we paskin like Reb Shimon, when you go back and you talk about all the other machlokes and wherever Reb Shimon took a stand, that's halacha l'maisa. New Mishnah. Okay, so we introduced the concept of a woman who is independently wealthy. Naflulo kisafim. If a woman inherits or is given or otherwise acquires money, cash money, and then she gets married. She is married and she inherits money. Now it's her money, it's not her husband's money. So what do you do with it? You lokach behem karka, you purchase land. In the Torah's thinking, land is the safest investment because they aren't making anymore and it rarely goes down in value. So you purchase land with it, v'hu ochel peiros, and it's nichsei malug, and the husband can benefit from the income generated from that land. Peiros, shahatilushin min hakarka, if she inherits a warehouse full of corn, fruit that is detached from the ground, so now it's a fungible commodity. You transfer those peiros into money. You take the money and you buy a field, and the husband benefits from the income derived from the field. Now, peiros hamechubarim bekarka, she inherits a piece of land that has a crop growing but not yet harvested. Omar Reb Meir, shominaiso kamehi yafa b'peiros. You try and get somebody who's a bucky to estimate the value of the crop, okay, and without, in other words, you estimate the land value without the crop and the crop value without the land. And with the excess money, kamu yafa below peiros, how much the land is worth when it's bare property, no fruit on it. Yilokach behem karka v'ochel peiros, and then you sell the crop after it's harvested and transfer that cash into more land, and the husband, and it's niksei melug, the husband can eat the peiros. The chachamim disagree with Reb Meir. Hamechubrim lakarka shaloi. He says that that's even though it was already growing, and it may only be the day after she inherits it that it is harvested, nonetheless, it's nichsei melug, the husband gets that stuff. V'hatilushin min hakarka shelo, if it's in the middle of the harvest and some of it's still growing and some of it's in the silo, she gets what's in the silo and he gets what's on the ground. Okay? V'yolakach behem karka v'hu oichel peiros, and the part that was hers, the corn in the silo, you sell and you transfer that money to buy more land, and the husband gets more income. Reb Shimon Aimer, here's where we agree with Reb Shimon. Makam shiyafa koicho b'nichaseha, nichasa, sorry, Kenisa, her property. When he benefits by marrying her, okay? Horach kaicho b'tziyasa, he has disadvantage if he divorces her. Makam shehura kaicho b'nichsa, when he is disadvantaged by marrying her, yafa kaicho b'tziyasa, he gets the benefit when he divorces her. So it's like a seesaw. Okay? Ketzad, what are we talking about here? How does it work? Peiros hamechubarim lekarka, if the fruit, the grain, whatever, is still attached to the ground, then he marries her and that property becomes his, as we just said, even if the day before harvest. Bitsiyasa, but if he divorces her, even though he spent a half a year working the field and plowing and seeding and fertilizing and weeding, shalah, she gets the benefit of, because it's still mechuber lakarka. V'hatalushin min karka, but if it was already harvested, the knisasa shelo, when he marries her, it goes to her. It remains her property. He doesn't get it. Ubitziyasa shelo, but if he divorces her, even if it hasn't been harvested yet, he can harvest it the next day and he keeps it. Okay. So we introduced in the Mishnah the notion that other factors being equal, you always buy land with the money because that's the safest investment. But sometimes the husband says, I have a friend who's opening doing a startup tech company, and I can make a killing with the money. Let's do that. So the Gemara says, if there's a dispute, if the wife goes along with it, then you can do it. But the Gemara deals with, what about disputes? How do you grade investments as to their safety? Pshita ara ubate ara. It's obvious. If she says, no, let's buy a farm in Kansas, and he says, let's buy an apartment house in Brooklyn, the rule is you go with the land. But if he wants to buy, if she says houses, I'll let you not buy land, but let's buy houses. And he says, Dikle, let's buy a palm orchard. But the houses are safer. Dikle v'ilone, if it comes down to date palms or other kinds, all other trees in the whole world, Dikle, date palms are considered safer because there's always a lot of dates and there's always, that's a pretty sure thing. Okay, Eloye v'gufne, if the choice is between an orchard or a vineyard, Elone, you go with the trees. Okay, so that resolves that. Now, what about where there are different things you can do, and some are more profitable than others, or there's a concept today called sustainability, right? So what if he Abba Zoradta, they inherit a forest, she inherits a forest that does produce a low value fruit, crab apples, okay? And it's more profitable to actually chop down the trees and use the wood, sell the wood. That'll give much greater income, okay? The Pira de Cavre, or she inherits a pond full of trout, fish, okay? Amre la Pera, some say that the trees and the fish in these examples are pere. They're the produce from the pond. The pond produces fish, the forest produces wood, and the husband has the right to chop down the trees or harvest all the fish and maximize his income in 1 year. The Amri Lekara, Karna, and others say no. These are assets that change the value of the property. A forest is more valuable than bare land. A pond that produces fish is more valuable than a puddle, a big puddle. So therefore, you consider that the Karen, and he cannot chop down the trees. He has to settle for the crab apples, and he can't take the fish. So, Klola de Milsa, how do we resolve this issue? What's the general rule? Gizahu mechalef, if he can chop down the upper portion of the tree and leave the rootstock whole, and a new tree generates from that rootstock, then pere, it's considered that its fruit, and he's allowed to sustainably harvest the forest. And similarly with the fish, if he sustainably takes fish out but leaves enough to regenerate the pond, then that's legitimate. And gizo mechalif, but if the tree will not grow again, korno, it's considered keren, and he cannot deplete the forest or the pond or similar circumstances. But we will see in a few minutes that there are situations where naturally the keren is depleted. For example, you own a silver mine. The business you're in is mining silver. But every ounce of silver you take out, there's a 1 ounce less in the ground. So you're automatically depleting the keren as you pursue the business that you bought the land for in the first place. Omer Rav Zera, Omer Rav Yoshaya, Omer Rav Yanai. The Amri law, others explain that it's Omer Rava, Omer Rav Yoshaya, Omer Rav Yanai. Someone else said it. Now we're going to talk about now a flock of sheep, and you are in the wool business. So you shear your sheep and you sell the wool, and the sheep grow back, and next year you shear your sheep and sell the wool. So, but the sheep also have babies. So is the baby pere or is the baby keren? If somebody comes along and steals Vlad behemoth malug, he steals one of these wool flock baby sheep. Mishalem talshlume kefali isha. He pays the kanas of the double payment to the wife. So on its face, this means that the baby is an increase to the keren. Because if it were payre, the money would go to the husband. That's his. Okay? Come on. So now, based on what we've learned so far, on whose authority is this statement made? Lo Rabbanan, it's not the rabbis, v'lo Hananya, and it's not like Hananya in the upcoming brisa. Desanya, we have a brisa. Vlad behemoth mulug labal. Babies born to the flock are considered pere, and they go to the husband. Vlad shichvas melug leisha, but the babies generated by female slaves are considered an increase in keren, and the baby belongs to the wife. Okay, that's the chachamim. Chanana ben Achai Yeshaya Omer. Chanana, the nephew of Yeshaya, says, Asu Vlad Shifcha Melug Kavlad Behemoth Melug. Even the offspring of slaves owned by the wife are considered melug, and the husband can take the baby slave and sell it and keep the money. So we see that both the Chachamim and Chananya say that the baby born to the sheep belongs to the husband. So why did we say the wife gets the kanas? You could say everybody agrees that the husband gets the baby and the wife gets the kanas. Pera tiknule rabbanan. Peri de peri lo tiknule rabbanan. The baby goes to the husband, but if something intervenes and there's a derivative of the baby, meaning the kanas, because the guy stole the lamb, then the kanas goes to the wife. Okay. Bishleim Chananya. So that works if we hold like Chananya, that everything is melug. Hainu delo chashinan lemisa. And we are going to make an assumption that although childbirth is dangerous, we ignore the risk of childbirth. In other words, a lot of sheep die when they give babies. A lot of women die when they have babies. So you could argue that the vlad is a replenishment of the keren to replace the dead mother. So we don't worry about that. Therefore, everything is maluk. Ella, the Rabbanan, according to the rabbis, the rabbis is contradict themselves by saying slaves go to the are different than the baby sheep, right? If we're worried about the death and the replacement of the keren, afilu vlad behemus malugnami loy. So the baby lamb should not be malug. It should be considered growing the keren. If we ignore the risk factor of giving birth, then slave babies should also be malug and go to the father, to the husband. So the rabbis have an internal contradiction. They are concerned about death. Shiny behema de ika oira. If a slave dies, you have to pay for a funeral. But if a sheep dies, it doesn't lose all its value. You can sell the meat as dog food, and you can sell the hide to a tanner so that the keren retains the dead sheep. And that's how the rabbis make their justification. Baby slaves are a replacement for the potential death of the mother, which is a cost to the estate. And baby sheep are malug because the dead mother is still property with value owned by the estate of the woman. Okay, now so we have a machlaikas from Hananya and the Rabbanan. Omer Rav Huna bar Chiya, Omer Shmuel, halacha kechananya. We paskin like Hananya, that the lamb and the lad are both the husbands. Okay? Omer Rava, Omer Rav Nachman, but Rav Nachman qualifies. Afal gafta Omer Shmuel halacha kechananya. Even though we say basically the halach is like Hananya, Maida Hananya, Im Nisgarsha, if the husband took the baby slave or the baby sheep and then they get a divorce, no senes tamim v'notalaton. This slave she has an emotional attachment to her slaves, and also she inherited them from her father, so they are in a sense part of the covet of the father. Oh, Schwartz had a lot of slaves, so she has the right to take other funds or kasuba or other sourced funds and buy back those slaves at the then cash value in the marketplace from the ex-husband. Mipnei shevach beis aviyah, because they represent the covet, the prestige of the father, and I'm adding, or she has an emotional attachment. Okay. Omer Rava, Rab Nachman. Rava says in the name of Rab Nachman. Now, we're going to talk again about estates that have a specific purpose when there could be a dual use. If you own sheep, was our original example, you could be in the business of selling lambs for lamb chops and sheep for mutton, or you could be in the business of selling wool. Depending on what business you're in, affects what's pere and what's keren. Okay, Omer Rav Nachman, Nisa lo oz. She brings goats into the marriage. lachalava, because the business of making goat cheese and selling goat milk, v'racha legizisa, or she's in the business of having a sheep flock that produces wool. Okay, the tarnigoyles lebeitzosa, or she has a bunch of chickens and their layers. V'racha v'dekel lepeirosav, or she has a date palm that is she's in the business of selling dates. Eichel v'haylech ad shetich lehakeren. These are businesses where there is a natural attrition, and eventually the business will have to go out of business. Let's say they want to maximize their income, so they only have female goats, they don't have rams, because they want to maximize the amount of milk. But eventually the flock will die out. So we say the husband gets the pay rate, even though the principal is depleted. And when you're down to the ancient palm tree with only 2 dates on it, he can pluck those 2 dates and say Kaddish for the palm tree. And therefore her estate has been depleted. Omer of Nachman, a similar case. Al Yele Galima. Her father had this magnificent Vicuna coat, and she inherited from her father, and she brings it into the marriage. Perahave, wearing the coat, is considered its use, its pay rate. So the husband, Mekase Bavi Azil Ad Dekalia. The husband can continue to wear this $10,000 fancy coat until it's completely worn out and is valueless. Because again, the depletion is mamela. It happens automatically by the proper use. Masha Ain't with the fish pond, the proper use is maintaining sustainability. And that was the distinction between the two. Come on, so who says that the husband can wear the expensive coat until it's completely ruined? Kihai Tana, like the Tana in the following brisa, the Sanya. Ha-melech v'hachol, if you own a salt mine or you own a sand pit, the woman, harize peiros, taking out salt or taking out sand is legitimately peiros. Pir shel gafris, v'chafores shel tzarif, or a sulfur pit or a potash mine. Similar, there's a dispute. Rav Meir Omer Keren. Rav Meir says they're automatically depleted when you take out the potash or the sulfur. So it's really Keren. The Chachamim Omrim Peiros. The Chachamim say the value of the salt mine or the potash mine is to gain the potash. And even though it's depleted, that's a legitimate use, and that's considered pei. So Reb Nachman, who said that you can wear out the coat, is going like the Rabbanan, who say you can legitimately deplete the ore in a mine. Now, Reb Shimon Aimer, Makam Shiyafa Kaicho, going back to the Mishnah, when in a place where the husband benefits, he gains by marrying her. He has disadvantage when he divorces her. When he's disadvantaged by marrying her, he gains when he divorces her. What are we talking about? Presumably, we're talking about he gains because he can legitimately deplete the potash mine. Right? So he gains. And she loses when he divorces her. She gets a depleted mine. He waits till it's all potash is all gone, and then he says, bye-bye, baby. So Reb Shimon Hainu Tanakama. Reb Shimon seems to be exactly the same as the Tanakama. Omer Rava Mechubarim B'Shas Yitzia Ikabenayu. We're talking about the farm that he just worked all year to create the payros, and it's the day before the harvest when they get divorced. That would be the difference between them, because there she would get the payros that are still attached. And therefore, Reb Shimon and the Tanakama are not in total agreement. New case. Some assets have what we call a usable life. When in taxes, we all know you can depreciate different asset classes over different terms. That's called a usable life. Slaves have a usable life too. People die at 70 or 80. So if you have a 65-year-old slave, it's worth less than a 10-year-old slave, because the 10-year-old slave has a 60-year usable life, and the 65-year-old slave has a 5-year usable life. But what if that slave is the nanny who raised you from the woman, with the woman and her property, raised her from childbirth? So it's not just a slave, it's something to whom she has an emotional attachment, okay? Naflula avadim v'shichvos zakenim. The woman inherits old male or female slaves. Now, we want to maximize, to protect her estate from depletion. So yimachru, you sell the slaves for whatever their current cash value is. V'lakach mehen karka, and you purchase land. V'hu oichel, and the husband gets the payros, the use of fruit, payros. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Aimer lo timkor. You do not have to sell the slaves if the woman wishes not to. Mipnei shehen shevach beis aviha, because they represent the prestige of the husband, and I add to this, or she has an emotional attachment.
You mean the prestige of the family?
Yeah.
Based on the
Yeah.
her father.
Literally her father, but it means for reasons other than financial, she wishes to retain him, knowing that, I have my Bubby's old silver candlesticks. There was a time when silver was very valuable, but I wouldn't sell them for $1 million, people say. If you ever watch what's that, Antiques Roadshow. It's only worth $50, but I wouldn't sell it for $1 million. Emotional value can overwhelm the financial concerns. Now, nafla lo zeisim v'gefanim zakenim. Plants, olive trees and vineyards also have a usable life, and you have them approaching the end. Yimkaru, you should sell them. V'yilakach behen karka, and purchase other land. V'hu achel peiros, and the husband gets the peiros. Reb Yehuda oimer, here it's not Reb Shimon, it's Reb Yehuda. Lo timkur, if the woman has values them more than their pure monetary value, she does not have to sell them. Mipnei shehen shevach beis abiyah, because they represent the prestige of the family. Schwartz olive oil is world renowned, and she wants to continue the business as long as possible, even though it is to her financial disadvantage. She has that right. Omer Rav Kahana, Omer Rav Machlaikes, Shenaflu B'Sayda Shalah. Here, you could own property in different ways. For instance, in Israel, you can purchase a building, but the other underlying land is owned by a national trust, and you get a long-term lease. Similarly, you buy a building in Manhattan, you could have a 99-year lease on the underlying land. So you own the thing on the land, but you do not own the land. Okay? Omer Rav Kahana, Omer Rav Machlaikes Shenafla B'Sayda Shalah. The dispute of whether the wife can be required by her husband to sell the old slaves or the old olive trees only applies in the olive tree case if she also owns the underlying land. Aval B'Sayda She'ena Shalah. But if she only leases the underlying land, she does not own it. Then Divrei Hakol Timkor. Then everybody agrees that once the olive trees are gone, there is nothing left whatsoever in the estate. You don't even own the underlying land. So the husband can force her to sell it. Maskif le Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, well, yeah, but if you do that comparison, what about the old slave, the old nanny that she adores, but the minute she's dead, there's nothing left? Maybe a couple of Polaroids. Hare avadim v'shichvos. What about slaves and female slaves? The chisaida she'einu shaladami. They're the same as a field that she doesn't own. Uplige, and they still argue that she doesn't have to act on her husband's insistence. Ella, itmar, hachi itmar. So the rule, if they did make any discussion about this at all, this is what they said. Omer Rav Kahana, Omer Rav Machlaikes B'Sada Sheina Shalah. The argument is if she does not own the underlying land, Aval B'Sada Shalah, but if it is her land, Divrei Hakol Timchar, everybody agrees she's not obligated to sell it at the husband's insistence, Mipnei Shevach Beis Aviha, because of the family prestige. Have a good Erev Shabbos, everyone. Kenny left me a little at the bottom, and last week he left me a Mishnah, so I'm returning the favor.
We did receive new calendars. Did anybody not get a calendar? We got a few yesterday.
It's amazing how modern economics is not at all dissimilar from economics then. It was very economically advanced society.
British Commonwealth based on?
Huh?
British Commonwealth based on these
Yeah,
laws.
yeah, I understand, but and our law is based, except for Louisiana, is based on British Commonwealth. Louisiana is based on.
Yeah.
Right.